Hey guys, it's Maria. For anyone that's watching our YouTube where we release our visual for the podcast, you'll see that we're actually using our microphones again. But silly me screwed up the recording, so you'll be listening to the DSLR camera audio. So that's all. Enjoy.
We're not given enough information about what it really looks like to hold ourselves accountable or to hold others accountable. We kind of just get told
Hold
it
them
is the way
accountable.
it is, or we put a lot more pressure on ourselves. It just seems very skewed.
Right,
We're not
just
really taught well about it.
It is what it is, so just stay there.
Right, and even with and it all starts in our homes, right? Even being able to hold parents accountable or hold siblings accountable. We're not very clear about what those lines are, and then manipulation comes into play, and it can get really blurry, really messed up really quickly and confusing. So when it comes to greater powers that be, right? Even in a democracy, we still we talked about before, we still idealize these people and seem like they're so far out of our grasp that we forget the point. There's that blurred place of them being famous and being a fangirl, and you're actually sorry, no, you're in a position that works for me because we're in a democracy. You work for us.
Again, the whole
we are not your fans. We don't like you. You work for us. And I feel the way that we've blown up, you're famous, that level of all of that, when you're even everybody that we consider famous, artists, actors,
musicians.
All of those people that we deem as famous and we celebrate and we idolize, they would not be who they are without us.
Right.
They would not make their money without us, and they are actually in service of us. And
because we give them the money.
Right, and it's not being a douchey thing to be but stop acting like they're better than you or they're so distant than you. They're just another person and you like them, and that's why you give them money. But if they were to do something you don't like, you hold them accountable.
Right,
and
it's the worst type of fangirling
right.
or fanboying.
And when you're better at doing that for a freaking famous person, an actress who buys a lipstick, and you're oh my god, I thought you were cruelty free,
whatever.
Turn around and do it to your freaking president and
of
the people who are in office. That they're literally not there for you to be oh my god, fangirl, you're so awesome. That's fun to do that too, especially when you have a female that's in that. But that's not the point. You're supposed to turn around and be hey, this is what we need. We like you and we'll celebrate you. But they're not getting into that role to be famous.
No, they're getting
unless they're Donald Trump.
Yeah. It's a whole PR stunt his last 4 or 5 years. Because what did you see out of his presidency? His tax cut. His tax law is the only thing that I know of because I live in that world.
Yeah.
His foreign policies, I don't remember anything. Period.
No, but let's be real. He was at the end of his line of being. Did you seen all of the things that had come out over the years? The things that I didn't realize. He was on episodes of Fresh Prince, and he was
he was doing commercials for random
fast
food companies.
He was famous, and he loved that. He loved the attention. Obviously, knowing his background and his not getting anything growing up, he loved that. And what of that has he had in the past? Before he decided to run for president, he was fizzling out.
Yeah.
And becoming irrelevant.
Apprentice came out, it fizzled out. And
I don't know. Where have you seen until he decided he was running for president?
Until he became political?
Right.
Yeah, where was he?
Right, no, exactly.
Sure. No, but I think to your point, you shouldn't be idolizing, we've been saying this.
Anybody, period. Literally, it's one of the only things that I say that, we talk about related to church, but you shouldn't idolize anybody. Everyone's a person.
Right, and they make mistakes, and you should hold them accountable, especially if they're president.
And forgive them when they do, which is why I just at this point feel bad for him.
Right, and I don't want to forgive his supporters yet. I don't even forgive him, so I don't even know what I'm saying. I don't even want to forgive them right now, because once Biden becomes inaugurated and everything, past all these, I'm sure he's going to sue every state possible that he lost.
Yeah, oh yeah. He already is trying to, start that going.
It just, this whole past week, they've undermined democracies, saying to stop the count.
Yeah.
I predicted last week that Trump was going to win, or it's going to be very close. I think I said win. That he was going to win the night of election, when all the ballots were in, all the not the mail-ins, the physical ballots.
Right.
Because he told his people to not vote through mail, because it's apparently voter fraud, which I don't know if that even... Not in this country. I'll tell you this right now. Not in this country has there been voter fraud to that extent. So I knew he was gonna win.
And
and it was surprising to me that he did it. It was very surprising to me that Biden did very well with the in person.
The day of, yeah.
Right, and also probably, you know, I don't know which states started voting beforehand, but I'm sure mail-ins were also counted then. So just knowing that his rhetoric and his agenda was to make his voters vote the day of, I knew he was going to win. When the mail-ins started rolling, especially PA and, like, you know, Nevada and, like, you know, the swing states, I knew it was going to flip. For sure. And then him saying to stop the count. It was funny because people were saying to stop the count in Pennsylvania, I think. But then in other states, with other Trump supporters, I don't know what other state it was, they were like, keep counting.
Yeah,
because he was winning.
Because, yeah.
So I can't forgive those people, because they clearly don't understand democracy.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's not that, I have nothing to be mad at. You're ignorant. And, like, I'm not going to be mad at you for your ignorance because, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think, I don't know. I feel like this would be a different conversation if we were in a different situation right now.
Right. It's the same thing with when the Black Lives Matter movement was. It's still going on. I'll say that, right? When it was at the height during the pandemic, right? The Black Lives Matter movement is still going on, obviously, and it will keep continuing until, you know, systemic racism, which Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually said outright they will fight to deal with systemic racism and hopefully uproot the foundation of what's happening in that. So it was great hearing that, like, actually say actual systemic racism as opposed to, like, beating around the bush.
Right.
So, but with, like, the Black Lives Movement Matter and the Trump supporters saying how intense and how un-American it is to, like, rally and protest and, like, destroy property and everything.
Right, right.
But then have them do the same thing the last week.
Yeah.
And to intimidate reporters on the streets at the polling places, saying that they're the ones that are bringing in more votes, like, you know, whatever.
Yes.
Like, that just stems from, number one, idolizing your president, even though you shouldn't. Number two, white privilege.
Yeah.
Because, like, Black Lives Matter movement was all, you know, a diverse group of people, but then even last week at the Parkway, did you see what happened in New Jersey?
Yeah.
They shut down the
I
Parkway.
almost got hit by one of those people.
Great.
Like 3 or 4 days prior to that.
Incredibly stupid, because with those rallies and protests, quote unquote, what are you protesting? Your person is in office. What are you doing? For the Black Lives Matter movement, we're protesting
like,
because we need...
there's an actual issue we're addressing.
Right, like, and we're still addressing, and yet that apparently is not American, but you doing this is American.
I don't...
And I don't want to... I'm not forgiving people for that.
And I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's for... I don't even know how to word it. Like
what is their point?
In order to give someone forgiveness, they need to be in a place
To hear it.
of remorse for their action, right?
And
so,
they
like,
don't.
I have no forgiveness to offer because, again, you don't have any awareness to see how what you're doing is wrong. So, again, like, I hate wrong, but, like, wrong. When it comes to, like, treating other people, like, I'm sorry, when it comes to, like, like, being
racist.
when your acts,
come on.
right? No, being racist. So but the way that I see racist is when it comes down to the fact that your acts are for the oppression of other people. Period. In any way, shape, or form. For the hurt.
Yes.
For the at any level, physical, emotional, whatever.
Systemic, everything.
Right. When your actions do that, I have. It's not that I don't have forgiveness. It's I have nothing to say because people who do that intentionally don't even care that they're hurting people. So like, it's not a like, I don't know. I'm like at loss of like what the word would be. I feel bad. Like the reality is, I feel bad for you, and I know that people who if anybody listens to this and they're like, well, you have no reason to feel bad for me. Like I'm great. Like that's exactly why I feel bad for you.
Privilege, because
you don't have any awareness, and I feel bad for you because of that. And if you don't understand that, it's exactly my point.
It's the white privilege talking, and I'm not saying, and I don't know if those people, I don't want to other them either. They're Americans. I don't know if they know what white privilege means. Period.
You can't.
Because it isn't that because you're white, Brittany, like, it's not, you don't take away the struggle. There's all these struggles in your life. It's just the skin color, your skin color is one less struggle that you have to deal with.
My skin color has set me up to not have to face things that people who are people of color have.
Right, there's still socioeconomic status, there's still gender identity, there's still, et cetera,
Oh,
et cetera.
yeah. Oh,
like,
totally.
But one less thing is one privilege that you have.
Which
again goes back to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
And how the people, that diverse population came out, the federal government was like, this is ridiculous. But then you have the federal government being silent during the Trump rallies.
It's not helping, yeah.
That's just one example of white privilege.
Or like encouraging like the violence against people who were at the rallies. There's another thing that was like, I was like in shock when I saw all of that. But here's the most blatant way that in like some very uncomfortable situations, and we've talked about this before. For me to like, I always knew white privilege was a thing, but it's different once you take on the perspective of firsthand, like really seeing it or putting yourself in that situation, like, which you never can do, but like taking on the perspective to really understand it firsthand.
Yeah.
And I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who's a young black man, and he has been having issues with his brakes. So he was like, he had his car lifted up on the jack and was like working under his car, and it started. He had just bought the car, and it started to get dark out, and he realized, he was like, you know what, like he made a comment. He's like, you know, I have to stop and I have to get out of the car because if like the cops drive by, they might think I'm stealing my own car. And that is a thing. I will never have to, like, you know what, like, those are things that will, when it comes to policing, like, those are things I'll never have the level of fear or concern or worry about.
Terrifying. That's
a perfect example. Like, that's the sad reality of a perfect example of what my skin color does for me.
And I was listening to a podcast, and it's called Left, Right, and Center. I don't remember.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
They're talking about, and I just started it, so whatever episodes are on Spotify, that's where I started. They were talking about, I think they're talking about policing. And the right-wing person was like, it's all a lie. Like, systemic racism in police force and just policing in general is just not real.
How could you say that if you know the history of what it was created for?
And his I might be misquoting him, but he was saying how the numbers don't lie, basically, is what his thing is. Because it's more, the policing is more towards the BIPOCs, I guess? Which, I mean, he's wrong. Like, it's just wrong because there are more police in urban places.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Urban places are typically diverse groups of people because of segregation and a lot of socioeconomic segregation happening in the back, right?
Right.
So if you have more police in urban places, it would make sense that you're more policing non-white people.
Right.
Because the white people, majority, are in the suburbs, or
right.
like more affluent places where policing isn't needed as much, unfortunately, right? Like something like to that effect. Like it just like doesn't make sense that the numbers don't lie, quote unquote.
No, you want to know what doesn't lie, guys? You want to know what doesn't lie? Freaking history.
I mean, yeah.
Like, you want to make an argument for whatever you want to make an argument. This is why we say if we don't study history, it's going to repeat itself. And this is coming out of like such a hypocritical person because I literally freaking hated history growing up. But again, at the same time, the history that we learned.
What history did you learn?
Right. The history that we learned was like the very frou-frou, look at our country, how great it is history. We didn't learn real history, right? So we didn't learn the full truth in the history of what happens in our country.
We didn't get the racist America history.
Right. So if you're going to make I don't care what freaking argument you make. If you're going to make the argument, you better turn around and look at the source of what happens and how things were created. The systems that we have in place were literally initially created to cause segregation, to control people of color.
Segregation
like,
is still a thing.
You can't argue otherwise. You just can't argue otherwise.
No.
You cannot.
And again, a thing that I preach whenever people talk policing and just basic, every time I get into like a whole basic civic conversation with people, I always bring up the fact that segregation still exists. Like, our school funding is based on how affluent your township is.
Right.
For people that are in, less affluent places, their education system isn't well off compared to like, I don't know, like the Princetons and like, whatever, of like New Jersey. So you're setting up people for more or less failure in those places, which then relates to policing.
Right. And it's not, that's the thing that's interesting too, is right?
It's not the kid's fault.
We don't,
it's the government failure and the lack of reform's fault.
We don't outright see segregation where it's like, no, you cannot be here.
It's
right?
not that.
It's a more manipulative version.
It's not that picture of like the two water fountains.
Right.
It's not that.
It's not that. But it's the aftermath of what that created, right? So it's segregation in the fact of in a super manipulative, effed up way where you are in a white affluent area and you see a black kid walking around and they're getting pulled over by the police. Like, that's still a level of, you want that level of separation to happen, and if somebody crosses that line, it's a red flag. That's a problem. That's the aftermath of the stuff that you're bringing up, right? Like, it's still an issue of, right, like, you say that everyone has access to equal education, and then you look at the comparisons of what education and resources these kids are actually getting in two different places in New Jersey. Like, if we talk about Camden versus Princeton, like,
Right.
You can't say that it's.
We're
not looking outright at people being told this is where you can be, this is where you cannot be. Yeah. We're now looking at the after effects of what that did. Like Maria said, like, people moved to different areas because of that, because of where they felt safe, where they felt like people who were like them were, where they could be in a community where they felt like they were a part of and they weren't going to have to be interrogated or abused. We're in the aftermath of that, but we still see where those lines get blurry, and the fact that we're choosing to ignore that still is a problem is where you get all of these issues from.
Agreed. I mean, there's another podcast I was listening to called Nice White Parents, and it follows a public school in New York. Yes. Where it was a middle school, so super young kids, middle school age. They were having struggles bringing in new students, because obviously in New York City, like, you get your pick, obviously, because there are a lot of schools there. So this particular school had like 30 like middle school kids coming in, but they had capacity for over 100 or something. Like 100. It's majority BIPOCs, I think. Yeah, it was a majority BIPOCs, and then all of a sudden this one white parent was like, oh, why don't we implement like a French like class? And then he headed up this thing, and then he separated the PTA with his funding group, his committee. And all of a sudden, within, I think the podcast went maybe 4 years into the whole process. 4 years later, over 100 kids, but then the majority shifted to white kids. So, even with schooling, like, it becomes more of a, oh, now it's our school. Because they started funding, this is like for our school, this is for our kids. This French program all of a sudden was like the thing to highlight, and it was because of these white parents that are like, yeah, like, we want this for our kids, but, like, what about the other students that were there first, and, like, their parents have chosen this school because, it was safe for them, but then even the kids notice, like, holy shit,
you still have the ability to remove that level of safety that they
also
have.
a white privilege thing, because now the kids were like, holy shit, there's a lot of white kids here, this is weird, like, and then some white kids.
That was me when I moved to the town that we both moved to when we were 9. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, there's so many white kids here. And it was sad, because it was like, when I was younger, they'd be like, oh, you're different. Like, like, it was like, and like, kids don't know better, etc., but like, they do.
No, but yeah, and they like, now they know way more than we did.
They do, but they're more progressive.
Yeah.
The kids that I see that are interacting with, my sisters or whatever, they're more progressive, and they hold their counterparts accountable.
Yeah.
They call out the other.
Speaking of holding people accountable and things that piss me off, have you paid attention to all of like the news outlets where they literally like outright would be like, African Americans? I heard no one use people of color, BIPOC. Even like saying black. Like, I understand there's more like people are more concerned about saying black or saying brown, but like if you're gonna, why are you still using African American? And, like, on a news outlet, as a white person, like, let's check off all the ways that this is not okay.
Right.
If you're not sure, like, anything, if you've never heard the term BIPOC or person of color before, please go back and listen to an earlier episode of the Be More podcast and just, like, learn. Please, like, stop. Like, it's not that you can't say African American. It's just that, like, the likelihood is that in our country at this point, like, this day and time, you're referring to somebody who's African American who's not African.
Right. And also, you don't know, I would assume black is more encompassing than African American.
Right.
But also, Joe Biden did say last night African American.
Did he?
But Kamala Harris said black. So, look, I don't want to politicize the African American term and also black. I mean, obviously it's very politicized, but I think it boils down to education. Whatever is right, but also it boils down to talking to those communities and asking what is the right term.
Right.
I think that's what that is.
True. And like just understanding.
Because I don't want to assume.
Right, and that's understanding like the way you say things.
That's why I just all come to say BIPOC now.
Right, and I think I've gone to that too. Like I've gotten to that because I understand how it can be better and it's more inclusive. Right, it's better because it's more inclusive and it's less isolating.
Also, it depends on the person's identity. I'm gonna take Kamala Harris as an example. Like, she is a black woman with South Asian descent, so she's Indian. Is where her mom was from. She identifies as black. I can't, like, that's her identity. I can't just be like, you use your Indian card whenever you want the Indian vote. Like, no, that she just identifies as black. Like, because those are the arguments that people are making, is that she uses her black card, quote unquote, when she wants the black vote, and then her South Asian card when she wants the South Asian vote. But also, like, if she just wants to call herself a black woman, which she has, leave her be. She's
and it doesn't
biracial.
change her. Like, it doesn't.
No,
it
she
doesn't,
just has a more identified person in the black community.
And it doesn't illegitimize her being a South Asian from, like, you know, being of South Asian descent. That, like, again, going back to what we said earlier, these boxes are multifaceted and multicolored and multi-everything. Like, whatever people say, they are allowed. You have no right to judge or make an opinion about the way other people identify themselves. So just stop.
Especially mixed race people. Because it's always been, even, I'm not a mixed race, I'm full Filipino, but I'm Filipino American. There's two identities fighting at war there.
Yeah.
So, like, for, like, again, Kamala Harris, like, she's a black woman and, you know, South Asian. She obviously identifies more as black. I obviously identify more as American than Filipino. But that doesn't make me less Filipino.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't make her less Indian.
And if anything, I mean, I would guess that at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not somebody who would be, you may not be in opposing views of a lot of things that we say. But in the off chance that you are, our country's called the melting pot for a reason. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the country where there's supposed to be opportunities and possibilities.
And if you think about it, right? Do you play with candles ever, like candle wax?
Sure.
Or, like, remember when we used to have those really fun things in the 90s where we'd pour sand in and it was all different colors?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you take that as an example, right? If we're going to use this melting pot analogy, right? You put anybody who's, like, 90s kid. We used to put those we do, like, sand art. That's what it was called, right? Sand art.
Yes.
You take those jars, you layer all your colors, right? Mm-hmm. And that's great. Like, they're all layered. It's all distinct. You shake that jar up, you can't say, oh, there's, like, it's a yellow jar, it's yellow sand, it's green, like, you're gonna, and someone might look at it and say, you know what, this is my jar, and I'm gonna say it's yellow. And another person might look at theirs and be like, this is my jar, and I'm gonna say it's green. Right. Like, you're not gonna be able to stand there and be like, you don't see green in your jar. Like, you can't change that.
Yeah, it's everyone's
Everybody has their own jar.
Yeah.
It's filled, it's shaken, it's settled the way it's settled, and they're gonna identify it, and please, no one says it better than, like, I love Gary Vaynerchuk. Do you follow him?
Who?
What?
Who?
Gary Vaynerchuk?
No.
We'll have another conversation about entrepreneurs in the future. But he shares a message all the time. He's a very successful entrepreneur, businessman.
Okay.
Like sports, he's all over social media, all that stuff.
Okay.
He shares the message all the time. His family is like his father, I want to say Russian or Middle Eastern. I might get that wrong. Sorry if anybody's a Gary Vee fan who listens to this and is like, wow, she's wrong. I might be. His parents are immigrants.
People can hold us accountable here too.
Let me learn because it's like make me remember. His parents are immigrants, and he's been very successful. He didn't have a great upbringing. Okay. Didn't have a lot, and he's very, very successful now. Sure. And he talks about all the time how, like, I don't care if you don't like somebody or you disagree with them or whatever. Like, you need to be kind to people.
Yeah, and that's literally all we're asking.
Is have a little empathy, show a little consideration, and be freaking kind. Whether people even if you voted for Donald Trump, you voted for Joe Biden, you voted third party, I don't care who you voted for.
You're so American.
Be nice to people.
Yeah.
And if you ever make a choice to not do that, then I'm gonna have some judgments and some opinions about you, but I'm never gonna wish any false.
No, I don't wish any
or bad ill will against you. But please, if we can look that's the problem. So the more of us that can wake up and realize we're all human, we need to be kind to one another. Literally the things that you learn in kindergarten that we all just for some stupid reason let fall out of our heads because we feel like we need to survive. Please be kind to one another. This is going to be a huge opportunity of hope for exactly that to happen, and for that hope to be so deeply sown into the integrity of who we are in this country that we can make a true and lasting change that opens it up to everybody regardless of how they identify themselves.
Yeah, that's
Brittany Cohen in 2020.
that's about it. I think that's all. That encompasses everything. So, I mean,
guys, we love you, and we're stoked.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not. I don't want anything bad to happen to those people. They're still American.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to put it. It's not a Democrat versus Republican thing again. Like, that's not.
And it's not a anybody versus anybody thing. If anything good's gonna come, they're gonna make it.
The issue is they're making it, but we also want you guys to have universal healthcare. We also want you guys to have education. Like, we still
have you ever heard the analogy about the pencil? The analogy story about the pencil. Like a grandfather gives his children, like a bunch of his grandchildren who are fighting about like who's stronger and bickering, he gives them all a pencil.
Sure.
And he says, if you can break the pencil, you're the strongest. They all break the pencil.
So they're all the strongest.
Right, you're all the strongest, whatever. Then he's like, okay, great. He gives them a clump of 10 pencils.
Yeah, if you
He
can
says,
break it.
if you can break it, you're the strongest. No one can break it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's the unity of us being able to stand up. The more people who can make the realization to understand how important it is to be kind and see us as a whole, right?
Yeah.
We are a human race. We are one race. We are all together.
Yeah.
The more of us that can do that, that unity is going to be more powerful. And at the end of the day, if we ever allow, for any different, distinct reason, for us to stray away from that very simple human concept,
Yeah.
that's when we're going to fall, and that's when we're going to fail at our goal, right? Like, we have to come together. We have to keep fighting for that cause. And I hope that this conversation inspired people to do that.
Right, because no matter who you voted for, all American doesn't really.
Yep.
Yeah. That's it. That's all.
Thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Be More podcast. There was a lot. New dawn, new day, new world.
Yeah,
Let's
for
do
sure.
this.
It's just a different chapter.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's make it better than the last one.
Yep. Okay. We good?
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you on the next episode.
All right, bye.